The first international window of the year had lots of activity around the world. The United States and Spain won the inaugural editions of the CONCACAF Gold Cup and the UEFA Nations League respectively. In Asia and Oceania we had the last stages of the Olympic qualifiers, and we also saw Jordan win the West Asian Football Championship. All of that of course caused movements in the FIFA ranking, which we will review here. Let's start with Mexico, who had a brilliant run at the Gold Cup. A draw with Argentina and a thrashing of Dominican Republic gave them some points, but it was the historic win over the US which gave a massive amount of points, because that's what happens when you beat a team high on the table in a major competition, away and by a 2-goal difference without conceding. In the quarterfinals, they beat Paraguay to get another 5 points. However, unlike the men's ranking, here in the women's, losses in the knockout stages do result in loss of points, and therefore losing to Brazil in the semifinals pretty much cancels out the win over Paraguay. In total, Mexico gained 43 points to climb 5 places, up to 31st. And while that is certainly a step forward, in reality this compensates a little for what was lost in that horrible 2022 World Cup qualifying tournament. In all of 2021, Mexico only played friendlies, which don't give or take many points, hence El Tri wandered between positions 27 and 28. In the first half of 2022, Mexico played the qualifiers for the CONCACAF Championship, but since those matches were against low-ranked teams, they don't get much out of that. Then came that awful qualifying tournament, where not only did Mexico fail to qualify for the World Cup and the Olympics, but also fell dramatically in the ranking, as the losses to Jamaica and Haiti cost 70 points and dropped Mexico 10 places, down to 36. Since then, El Tri hasn't really recovered because they've only played friendlies with not so great results, just 1 win in 5 matches, and the qualifiers for this Gold Cup, which again were against low-ranked teams and don't give many points. In the meantime, it is true that Mexico won the gold medal at the Central American and Pan American Games, winning all their matches, but for some reason FIFA didn't consider those tournaments for the ranking. Now, in this Gold Cup, as we've seen, the games with Argentina and Dominican Republic gave very little. It was the win over the US that boosts Mexico into a higher position. That win compensates one of the 2 defeats of the 2022 World Cup qualifying tournament. To recover all those points and get back to where they were, Mexico must defeat another powerhouse at a major tournament, because as we've seen, friendlies and games against low teams won't get them that far. This Gold Cup also gave us some interesting case studies about some peculiar aspects of the formula. Brazil lost points despite beating Puerto Rico. The difference in points between them was 720, which gave Brazil an expected result of 0.984. An explanation of what that number means and how to obtain it can be found in this video up here, where we explain how the formula works. According to the formula, to get positive points, we need the result to be larger than the expected result. So in this case, we need something larger than 984. And according to the results table, which we also explained how to read in the previously mentioned video, we get that when we win by 6 goals or more. In other words, given the difference between the teams, the formula expected Brazil to win at least 6-0. But since they only won 1-0, we use this value of 0.85, which is smaller than our expected result, and thus Brazil lose points. Another thing I don't like about this formula is that even before kickoff, the US were doomed to lose points in their game with Dominican Republic, regardless of the score. For the US, the expected result was 0.996, but in this table, the highest value there is 990. Which means that no matter what happened, the result was always going to be smaller than the expected result. The US won that game 5-0 and lost 7-10, but that didn't matter. They could have won that game 20-0 and they will still have lost points anyway. I think this is a huge flaw in the formula. In the semi-final against Canada, the US also lost points despite going through. The match ended 2-2, which in principle gives each team 0.51 points. However, since it went to penalties, the winner gets another 10 and the losers lose it, making it 61 for the US and 41 to Canada. This bit of information is exclusive from me, because for some reason FIFA doesn't mention that anywhere in the rules. That's something that I had to figure out on my own. Doing the operation, we have that the US lost 5 points and Canada gained 6. The formula expected the US to win in 90 or 120 minutes, but since they require a penalty shootout to win the tie, they lose points. Speaking of Canada, there's another interesting thing. They beat Costa Rica twice, but in the first one they get 2 points and in the second they lost 8. In their first meeting in the group stage, Canada's expected result was 0.92, which meant that the formula expected them to win by at least 3 goals, which is exactly what they did. In their second game, now in the quarterfinals, their expected result was practically the same, so the formula expected the same score. However, Canada barely won 1-0, which in principle gives them 0.85 points. but because it was in extra time, here what FIFA does is to take a tenth of the winner, thus making it 0.75. Solving the operation, we get that Canada lost 8 points, and this bit of information is also exclusive from me, because FIFA doesn't mention that anywhere in their rules. Another interesting question we got on Twitter was, how come in that Mexico nil, Argentina nil, Argentina lost 3 points while Mexico got 7/10? How did that happen? Isn't this supposed to be a zero-sum system where one team's gain is another team's loss? This is caused by an imbalance in the formula. Let's say that in a game, the expected result for a team is 55 and for the other 45. If the game ends 1-0, we give 0.85 points to the winner and 0.15 to the loser. As we can see, the sum of that is 1. And to get the points, we know that the formula is result minus expected result. So for team 1, it will be 85 minus 55 equals 30. And for the other is 15 minus 45 minus 30. Perfectly balanced, as all things should be. Now, if the score is 2-0, 0.92 is given to the winner and 0.08 to the loser. Again, the sum of that is 1, and in terms of points, it will be 37 for the winners and minus 37 for the losers. We're still in balance. In case of a draw, if it's 1-1, each team gets half a point, which will result in plus minus 0.05 points. But, if like in this Mexico-Argentina, the score is 0-0, each team gets 0.47 points, and that breaks the balance because the sum of that is not 1. When we do the operation, we get minus 0.08 for one team and plus 0.02 for the other. Multiply by the importance of the game, which is 45, and we get that Argentina lost 3 points while Mexico gained 7/10. And this unbalance will occur in all draws other than 1-1. Having reviewed all of that, this is what the top of the table looks like. South Korea beat Czechia and lost to Portugal in a couple of friendlies and lose 3 points. China didn't play and thus remain with the same points. Belgium won their 2 playoff games in the Nations League against Hungary and get 4 points. Austria lost to England and drew with Denmark in friendlies and lose 3 points. Norway beat Croatia in their 2 playoff games in the Nations League and barely get 2 points for that. Iceland, also in the playoffs, drew with Serbia in the first leg and in the second won 2-1, but the formula expected them to win by 2 goals and therefore lose points. Italy drew with Ireland and lost to England in friendlies and in total lost 8 points. Denmark only played 1 game, a friendly with Austria, and lost 1 point for that draw. Australia booked their place at the Olympic Games by beating Uzbekistan in both games for a gain of 9 points. In the Gold Cup, Brazil won their 3 games of the group stage, but as we saw, they lost points against Puerto Rico, and thus the other 2 wins helped them just to recover those points. Beating Argentina in the quarterfinals gave them 6 points and got another 6 in the semi-final against Mexico, but the defeat in the final cost them 7. Canada won their 3 group stage matches, but since they were against low-ranked teams, they get very little for that. Then, as we saw, they lost points in the quarterfinals against Costa Rica. In semifinals, despite losing in the penalty shootout to the US, they get 6 points because they did better than the formula expected. A loss in 90 or 120 minutes was expected, but they managed to take it all the way to penalties. In the tie for a spot at the Olympics, North Korea lost 7 points and Japan get 5, and more importantly, the tickets to Paris. The Netherlands are without a doubt the greatest losers of this window. They didn't qualify for the Olympics after losing their 2 Nations League matches, and the formula punishes them severely by taking off a massive amount of points because they lost 3-0 in the first game and then 2-0 at home. Germany lost the semi-final to France, but then recovered by beating the Netherlands away and booked their place in Paris. Sweden won their 2 playoff games against Bosnia, but gained very little because it's an opponent very low in the table. England got 7 points for a couple of wins over Austria and Italy in friendlies. France beat Germany in the semi-final of the Nations League, but the loss to Spain in the final cost them 10 and thus end up with minus 3 points. The US was always in a difficult situation. Being so high in the table and having the home field advantage meant that the formula expected them to win all their matches, but as we saw, they lost points against Dominican Republic and gained very little against Argentina. It was the loss to Mexico that really hurt them. It was 39 points in one blow. They gained against Colombia but lost points against Canada in the semi-final. And finally, they recovered a little by beating Brazil in the final, but here is where we see the toll of that Mexico loss. Despite winning the tournament, they lose a massive amount of points. And last but not least, Spain won the Nations League and booked their place at the Olympics by winning both matches and gaining 20 points. Rearranging the table, we get this. Not only do Spain retain the lead, they also extend it. Now, England have climbed to second while the United States fell to fourth, which will certainly raise some eyebrows. So you can win a couple of friendlies and you go up, but if you win your major continental competition you lose places? Where is the logic in that? For better or worse, the FIFA ranking doesn't sort teams according to titles or whether or not they qualify for a certain tournament, but by how many points they gain or lose on a game-by-game basis. And as we have seen, England don't go up just because they won a couple of friendlies, but also because France lost the Nations League final to Spain and the US lost at home in a major competition against a relatively low-ranked team. It is the combination of all of that that allows England to claim those two positions, which is a good example of how, to gain places in this ranking, two things are needed. First, you need to do your thing, which is win your games by the largest margin possible to get as many points as possible, but you also need the teams around you to have bad results so they can drop points. Had France and the US not lost those matches, England would not have passed them. This update also defines the spots for the Olympics, which leaves us with Spain, France and the US in pot 1, Germany, Japan and Canada in pot 2, and Brazil, Australia, Colombia in 3. New Zealand and the two African teams, whose identity we will discover in April, will complete pot 4. What a nice tournament we will have in Paris. As usual, if you find this video interesting and informative, I will be very grateful if you could share it so it can reach more people. Thank you.